Hello everyone, so today we are going to continue with the academic word list, sublist 3 and 4. So as you can see, I have already highlighted the words as usual in red and green. The words that are not highlighted, I'm not going to talk about them. The words highlighted in green are very important words. So if you have time, please check them in the dictionary. We are only going to focus on the words in red. Before we do that, let's just mention the words in green. We have considerable, we have learned this word already. Contribute, criteria, link. Link is a very useful word both as a verb and as a noun. For example, you can say, there is no link between the crime and the suspect. You can also have specify and the adjective specific, a very important word. For example, in the structure, to be specific. There are differences between A, B, and C. And then you have task and technique. All of these are very useful words. Please look them up when you have time. Now, let's focus on the word in red. The first two important words are demonstrate and illustrate instead of show. So from now on, instead of saying show, you can try to use demonstrate and illustrate more. You can say, for example, the findings demonstrate the danger of smoking. You can also demonstrate the process of checking the dictionary to your students. You can also demonstrate how to operate the machine, or the video illustrates how the dictionary is used. Or you can also write, the graph illustrates the increase in inflation rates. So the two words demonstrate and illustrate are very useful, especially when you want to write well in Task 1 IELTS, describing graphs. Now, the next three important words to learn are emphasize, stress, and highlight. All of them mean the same thing, and all of them are academic words. You can highlight the problems. You can lay particular stress on learning English. You can also emphasize the need to study vocabulary. The next word to use is ensure instead of make sure. So from now on, don't use make sure. Use ensure instead. For example, you can write, we must ensure that all students enjoy equal access to education. In this sentence, I have two academic words, ensure and access. The next word to use is initial instead of first. So from now on, instead of writing my first response, you can write my initial response was one of shock and disbelief. The next word is instance instead of example. So instead of writing, for example, you can write for instance. And you can also use instance in the sentence like this. Numerous instances of school bullying are being investigated by the school. Now the next three important verbs to use are locate, detect, and identify instead of find. For example, you can locate an error in the essay. In this sentence, I have two academic words, locate and error. You can also detect a pattern in the chat, or you can identify the source of stress in our modern society. So here we have three academic words, identify, source, and stress. Now, the next word to use is outcome instead of result. So here, for example, you can write three outcomes of the negotiation were identified. I have two academic words in here, outcome and identified. Now, as usual, for fixed expressions, you cannot normally use the synonyms. For example, you can say as a result or as a consequence. These are fixed expressions, so they are correct. But you cannot really change it to as an outcome. Now, as an outcome is not a fixed expression, so it is not exactly correct. So as you can see, for fixed expressions, don't try to use the synonyms. Now, the next verb to use is rely instead of depend. For example, you can write, we rely on 4 criteria to assess teaching quality. Here we have three academic words, rely, criteria, and assess. The last two very important academic words to use are sufficient and adequate instead of enough. For example, you can have sufficient or adequate time instead of have enough time. You can also give sufficient or adequate attention to your children, or you can receive sufficient or adequate care from your parents. So from now on, no more enough, try to use sufficient or adequate. Now, sublist 4. In sublist 4 again, you have words highlighted in green and in red, and the words that are not highlighted at all. The words highlighted in green, we have already covered some of them, and the rest I leave to you to check them in the dictionary. Now, let's focus on the words in red. The first two important verbs, concentrate and focus. They mean the same thing, and both of them are academic. For example, you can say students need to concentrate or focus on their studies if they want to succeed. Now, the next word is despite instead of in spite of. Despite is an academic word. So you can write, despite their drawbacks, zoos offer a safe space for endangered animals. So from now on, no more in spite of, use despite instead. The next noun to use is error, an academic word, instead of mistake. For example, you can write, we detect an error in the plan. Here we have two academic words, detect and error. The next word to use is grant instead of give. For example, he was granted permission to study abroad. The next word is option instead of choice. So from now on, don't say choose my choice. Say select my option. Or as in here, sometimes zoos were the only option for some endangered animals. Now the last word is very useful, summary or conclusion, as in the expressions. In summary or in conclusion, protecting the environment is everyone's task. In here, I have three academic words, summary or conclusion, environment, and task. Okay, so that's it for sublist 3 and 4. Next time I will try to cover sublist 5, 6, and maybe more. Thank you for listening.